Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm still really annoyed that it's not summer yet in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, what the hell? It's June and we continue to get inundated by rain. It seems to fall most weekdays and every weekend, and it totally blows. I know, I'm always complaining about something, and if you want a happy intro, I'm not your podcast. I tend to complain about my life or the industry or something, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe it makes me feel better about myself. Who knows? Really, I have a ton of problems, and they are all insignificant first world problems that I place too much importance on. So I start complaining about the weather, but what's interesting about our summers here is that when the weather turns, Seattle has the best weather and is the best city in the country, minus the homeless issues and the human feces on the street and the high cost of living and the car break-ins and the closed bridges. But the funny part for me is that I go on vacations for about half of the summer, and you can bet that every day I'll be gone, the weather will be perfect in Seattle, and I'll return to straight up fall. And while I'll miss some of the best Seattle weather every year, I can live without it because I'm usually in a great place. This summer, I'm going on an Alaska cruise. And who could complain about the cruise my dad is taking us on? Well, I can. And while he gave me his credit card to pay for everything, which was super nice, I'm also tasked with figuring out the excursions, think ziplining, helicopter trips, whale watching, dinners on the boat, and all the rest of this stuff. And all of this has to be booked, and everything is a hassle to make happen based on limited availability. It's like, while this is supposed to be fun, thinking about our trip is starting to stress me out. And with all this vacation-based stress, which is really minimal, I decided to up my anxiety level even more this week and totally step out of my comfort zone and talk to a badass from another space. Tyler Bereman was born into a family of motorcycle riders, and he's done everything from flat track racing to supercross to finding his home in freeriding. And I hate to call Tyler's story a rags to riches story, but in the expensive world of Moto, Tyler was able to make a big name for himself out of hard work and a career pivot. It's a cool story, and before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, and please share my posts on social media and tell your friends about the show. It really does help it grow. Finally, I want to ask you to support my sponsors as they really do make the show happen. They are Stanley, Hest, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Tyler Bereman.
Sorry if it's a little loud in the background. I'm sitting in the van at the track right now, putting in some motos, getting ready for Mammoth.
All good, man. I think it'll work out fine. And the reason that we set up this podcast is because your people had reached out to me, seeing if I wanted to have you on the podcast, said you would just put out your movie with 805 Brewing, The House That Built Me, and that's free online. And they wanted to get some promotion around the movie. But being that you spend the majority of the time in your van or on your bike or thinking about bike-related things, are you even aware that people are out there doing this for you all the time?
I am aware. I got a massive team of people behind me to help me push this movie and produce this thing. So they're constantly behind the scenes helping me work and push this thing, and can't thank them enough for all the effort behind the scenes and getting this thing out there and getting as many eyes on it as we can.
You say there's a lot of people behind you, but I mean, how many people are pushing for you on all different aspects?
Oh, man, I got so many key people in my corner. I got a mechanic, I got a couple managers, obviously all my close sponsors of Red Bull, Fast House, Bell Helmets, 805, Oakley. I have a bunch of sponsors that help keep me afloat, and there's a constant team of people constantly helping me. And then obviously behind the scenes at 805, we got a full team of people there for PR stuff and then just helping me push this video and all my other future projects. So there's constant team effort, and there's no I in team, so it's amazing to have the help, and then obviously the support of all the fans and everybody tuning in to watch the video at home. Like, I wouldn't be able to do it without the massive team of people behind me.
Nice. Well, sometimes you put on an interview where the interviewer has no clue what they're talking about.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, every once in a while you do it. That's what the whole goal of this whole film was, to bring the viewers that don't know much about it and kind of give them an insight into my industry and as well as my life and kind of where I've gotten to, and try to just inspire people to go out and ride a motorcycle, because that's what we do. Is why we do it is because it's fun and we love it, and it's a feeling that you can't explain or put into words until you just try it. And once you try it once, it seems like most of the time you're hooked for the rest of your life.
Nice. Well, I've had a dirt bike and I think they're super fun, but I can't say I'm the most knowledgeable person. So maybe I don't fall into that category of someone who knows nothing about what they're talking about. So you'll need to forgive me with any dumb questions. But your story's a cool one because you were born into racing, and it all starts with your grandfather who starts Bereman Racing, and he seems like an old school motorcycle badass. Describe who Captain Ron was.
Captain Ron, he was a motorcycle enthusiast his whole life. He had the need for speed. He loved cars. He had race boats back in the day and motorcycles. And yeah, he just loved it. It's one of those things when you ride a motorcycle, it's a one-on-one thing. It's you against the elements, whatever it is. So Captain had been doing it for a long time, and then started my dad when my dad was super young. My dad started racing for years as he was a teenager, and then he kind of took a back seat on racing for a bit and just kind of worked a job and got on his feet. And then before he had me, he started racing again, and then I basically just grew up at the track, and I was around motorcycles since the day I was born. So they got me a motorcycle, my first one, at preschool graduation. So I was 4 years old, and it's pretty much been my life. I love it so much, and it's something that you can't replace, and it brings so many cool experiences and brings us closer together as a family, being able to go on the weekends and do what we love and do it together as a family.
Doing it as a family, it's not easy, I wouldn't think, because these sports are expensive, and I don't think your dad is just swimming in money by any means. And is there a lot of help from Captain Ron in just getting your motorcycle career started, even from a little kid?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for him. My dad, he worked his ass off, but, he was never well off to be able to afford motorcycles. And as we know, motorcycles are expensive. Motorcycle gear is expensive. Everything that has to do with it's expensive. So I was very fortunate enough to have my grandpa get me started early, get me my first bike. And without him, I wouldn't have been able to do this. He took us to races for years and funded the program. And, my dad kind of took a back seat to racing when he was young, and kind of got back into it for fun, kind of race at the professional level. But my grandpa basically saw myself and my dad again, and he said he didn't want to not give me the opportunity. So he gave me the opportunity, and I absolutely ran with it. And there was a time there when I was a kid in high school, and then I took a backseat on racing, and I installed hardwood floors for 3 years, and I learned the value of $1. And I kind of told myself that's what I wanted to do when I grow up. When I graduated from preschool and I slid down the slide, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up, and I said I wanted to be a professional motorcycle rider. So never gave up on that dream. I raced for years, amateur level, and then got to pros, raced supercross, raced a few motocross races, outdoor motocross races, and then slowly just had to transition into what I do now, which is free riding and creating content. And unfortunately, the injuries kind of made me take a back seat on racing, but I was able to kind of reinvent my program and be able to earn a living off of traveling the world and enjoying what I do and creating content. So this whole entire process wouldn't have been possible without Captain Ron.
I mean, that's some incredible, I think, media training and just speaking right there as you've gone through your whole life and times in like 4 minutes out of a 30,000 foot view. Now, I'm going to dive into it because you grow up in small town USA, Templeton, California. There's under 10,000 people living there. And is it living on a compound? Is it like your dad and your grandpa and everybody live together? Or is it like you live down the street from your grandpa?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town. I left when I graduated high school when I was 18, and I've been down in Southern California since. But when I left my hometown, there was basically 3,500 people. It's rapidly growing now, but where I grew up, my grandparents had bought a house in Atascadero when my dad was in high school. So they've lived in that same house their whole life. And when I grew up, my dad had another house in the same town, but they didn't all live together. But my dad would go to work, my mom would go to work, and in that time, they would just take me to my grandparents' house, and my grandpa basically raised me, and that was the first place I learned how to ride a motorcycle, and it literally was the house that built me. My grandfather is the house that built me, and his house was the house that built me. His race shop, I've spent many, many, many hours and days out there, and him teaching me how to work on my bikes and take care of them. it's really cool to go back there, kind of soak it all in. I'll go back to the barn where we have at his house and just kind of able to sit back and look through all the old memories and really enjoy it. So we didn't live on a huge compound. It was just about an acre and a half, but it was just enough for me to ride around the property in the back. And then we had our Bereman Racing race shop that still stands to this day. And yeah, it was the house that built me for sure.
You're on an acre and you're learning to ride bikes there. But it sounds like your grandfather had access to like 500 acres where the Salinas Ramblers come into play. And tell us what that motorcycle club's all about.
Yeah, so out of Hollister area in California, about Central California, my family belongs to a motorcycle club that owns 500 acres, and it backs up to 100,000 acres of BLM land that actually, unfortunately, got closed down in 2011. But I grew up riding in some of the best terrain in all of California, and the motorcycle club is amazing. You got to pay your dues to get in there and do the work and go to the club meetings and go to the club events and stuff. But they put on enduro races, and it's all about a family atmosphere. You come out, you bring your motorhome. There's no service. There's up in the mountains, and everyone comes and camps for the weekend and goes trail riding. And it's amazing to see all the families in the club bring their kids out and start them young. And that's exactly what my family did. My grandpa's been a member since the 60s, and my dad's been a member for as long as I can remember as well. So I'm sure one day that I'll pay my dues and be a member. I'm on my own deal right now, so once I slow down, I'm going to love to get back up there and hopefully become a member. But it's amazing to have that in the family and have that property and be able to utilize it. It's a fun place to just bring everybody together.
Yeah, it sounds like a rad time, and it sounds like that's all you do when you're a child is things revolving around motorcycles. Are there any team sports, or is there anything else, or is your family just all about bikes and that's it?
Growing up, I was obviously my family let me be a kid. I played soccer, I played baseball, I played football one year. I did the team sports, but it's funny. A couple times I would make the all-star team, and once I did, I'd kind of miss a couple of the games for some races, and unfortunately got kicked off some of the teams just because I missed too many games to go to races. But racing has been my life, and it's the one thing that makes me happy more than anything else. So at the same time of it not being a team sport, it's a family sport, and just being able to have my family involved and being able to ride with my dad still to this day is something that I can't put into words.
And I would think that when you're growing up and you're going to all these races, because you start at like 4 years old and you're racing and it's all flat track stuff. But when you're a Grom, you're a little kid and you're looking up to the heroes in Supercross, I would think, or motocross, like the McGraths and the Emmigs of the world. Are those the dudes that are littering your walls with pictures, like the Jeremy McGraths of the world?
You know what? It's funny that you say that. Jeremy McGrath was my absolute hero growing up. And for my 8th birthday in my dad's condo, he had a picture of Jeremy McGrath doing a knack off the finish line painted on my wall for my 8th birthday. So every single morning when I was a Grom, I got to wake up and turn around and look up to Jeremy McGrath doing a knack up behind my headboard. So yes, I had their pictures littered all over, and I was an avid fan as a kid. And it's pretty funny that I can kind of fast forward to this day and age, and I get to see Jeremy all the time and someone that I call a good friend. So it's kind of funny how the world works. And yeah, looked up to him for so long, and just kind of surreal being able to call him a friend now and being able to ride with him and just kind of look up to him still as a rider, a human, and an athlete, and all the above. So it's pretty surreal, but yeah, they were littered all over my house. And, the only book I've ever read in my whole life was the Jeremy McGrath book from front to finish. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. He was my hero growing up, and still to this day, I think I can say that he's confidently one of my number one heroes.
Oh, it's pretty rad. And it sounds like by the time you turn 8 and you get that picture painted on your wall, that's when you kind of think flat track is fun, but you want to spend more time in the air. And the best way to do that is motocross. When you tell your dad and grandfather about wanting to make the switch, are they totally down?
Yeah, my dad and my grandpa, they back me 110% in every way possible. Anything I would want to do. Even if I wanted to stop racing and I wanted to go do something else, they would back me in my every move. So for that, I'm very thankful. But as soon as I told them that I didn't want to race flat track anymore and I wanted to start jumping, and that's pretty much what I did in my spare time. When we were going to these events and flat tracks, I would ride my bike around the pits and I would go try and find a little mound of dirt and jump off of it. So once I started doing that, I was hooked, and that's all I wanted to do. So as soon as I went to them and told them that's what I wanted to do, they backed me 110%. And obviously, coming from a flat track background, they didn't know anything about it. So my grandpa literally told me verbatim, word for word, that we would just learn together. So that's what we did. And we chased it for years and created so many memories on the road, being able to go to all the races and just enjoy it as a family.
And that path is expensive, and knowing that the family has to put a ton of money into your riding, just going place to place is expensive. Nothing's cheap about motorcycles, like you said. But does that put extra pressure on you? Like, you have to make them proud and you realize that they're putting everything they have into you?
Yeah, you know what's cool about it is my grandpa was a really good businessman. He was really smart with his money, and we did it for fun. It was expensive, but they didn't put a lot of pressure on me. It was all 100% for fun growing up until I put the pressure on myself and started competing in amateur nationals. And, it started to get a little bit more expensive. But, my grandpa told me a long time ago, if I didn't start making some money by the time I turned 18, then I'd have to figure it out on my own. And fortunate enough, I turned pro right before that and started making a little bit of money and was able to kind of get on my feet and be able to chase this dream. So I was just very fortunate to be able to have that. I was definitely not on the level of the kids that I was racing with. I would show up and I'd have one, maybe two bikes and, a motorhome and a trailer. And a lot of kids would have multiple bikes and unloading 8, 9 bikes. And, I wasn't quite on that level, but I made do with what I had. And I think coming from a background of having to work for it and the struggle makes it that much sweeter at the end of the day when I'm able to create a living off of doing what I love.
Dude, and having 8, 9 bikes and a trailer to carry them all. I mean, each bike's what, like 10 grand?
Yeah, I mean, obviously back then at that time, and the smaller bikes when I was racing, they weren't quite that expensive. The technology and the bikes these days have gotten so advanced that the price is pretty much through the roof now. But I mean, even me just having 2 bikes and you showing up with 2 bikes, it's at least, 10, 12 grand between the 2 bikes. So, I mean, if you're thinking 5, 6 grand a pop for the bikes and these guys are rolling out 8 bikes, you got a lot of money in motorcycles sitting there. So, I didn't quite have the support or the funds that some kids did, but, I think that's what makes us into who we are and being able to work for what you want. So I'm very thankful for that whole situation and opportunity.
So while the sport definitely looks like it's like a blue collar sport where people are wrenching on shit all the time and people really know their way around an engine and just mechanics, it's really, there's a lot of money in the sport as well. Not that you guys were a lot of money compared to a lot of the other people, but there's a ton of kids that are like rich kids out there, I would think, with, the 8 bikes and they're living large.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the sport that we do. I mean, it's an expensive sport and there's no way around it. You got to have some money to even get into it. So I'm thankful that my grandpa was able to spend the money that he did and had to get me going. And it doesn't matter the amount of money that we spent. It's the memories that'll last a lifetime. And, I don't think I could ever repay them a dollar amount, but as long as I can just continue to make them proud, then it makes it worthwhile.
Okay. And so we're in life, it's about like the mid to late 90s. And while I mentioned that I'm not that into moto, I did have a dirt bike back in the day. And when I lived in Vail in the late 90s, I worked at a shop and a pizza place, and we could not get enough of the Crusty Demons of Dirt series back there. I think 1 and 2 were out. It was the one where Enslow broke his motorcycle frame in the dunes. And watching those videos, it was like, holy shit. Those dudes make that life look so much fun, and it's so dangerous. And were you addicted to those as a kid growing up?
Absolutely. I grew up on all the Krusty videos, Terra Firma, Steel Roots, all the old school videos. It was before content was in this digital age, and being able to pop in the VHS, I watched them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times and grew up on that. And, I told myself I wanted to be a professional motorcycle rider. I chased the dream of racing and trying to be champion and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I told myself I just want to be able to ride a motorcycle and make a living. So fast forward to now, I'm basically living that life, not so much on the edge of like what the Krusty guys did, but I'm being able to travel and film and have a good time in the process. And that's super important for what we do. That's why we ride motorcycles, is because it's fun and we love it. And being able to go out and create content and travel the world like that and just do free riding is amazing. And it's a lot less pressure and you get to really enjoy the fruits of your labor.
And I would think when you're watching those videos and see that lifestyle when you're a kid, you'd want to be those dudes, like doing those tricks and being at all the events that they were at. Did you ever get into the FMX style of riding and tricking?
Yeah, I always wanted to be those dudes, but I'm more, back in the day when the Crusties and the Terra Firmas and Steel Roots and all these videos that I grew up on, there wasn't so much freestyle yet. It was more just free riding. These guys are going out to the hills, and like the terrain of Southern California is amazing for free riding, and there's elevation and rolling hills everywhere, and guys would go out and find jumps in the hills, and that's what appealed to me most. I love freestyle. I love everything about it. I'm friends with so many freestylers, but I never really got into the whole trick thing. I can do a couple tricks, but I'm more of a racer coming from a racing background. So it's more whips and style and, just creativity is what really appeals to me more than anything.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. This summer, make Peter Glenn your one-stop shop for all of your fun needs. Think everything you'll want or need for wakeboarding, inline skating, hiking, swimming. You get the idea. Peter Glenn has the best brands at the lowest prices. And if you find a lower price from a reputable storefront, Peter Glenn will match that price. There's a reason Peter Glenn has been around for over 60 years, and that's because they're the best. To find out more, head on over to peterglenn.com. My next sponsor is Rollerblade, and they pretty much invented the sport of inline skating, and it's no surprise that they make the most comfortable, high-performance skates out there. If you're already a skater, check out the fit and finish of the 22 Rollerblade line. It will have you skating further and faster than ever before. If you're a new skater, Rollerblade has you covered with skates that are engineered to keep you comfortable, having fun, and most importantly, in control. To find out more about the 2022 offering, head on over to rollerblade.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, the brand famous for that iconic bottle that kept your grandfather's coffee hot and his water ice cold. Well, Stanley still has that bottle, but they also have everything you're going to need this summer to go camping. Nothing else matches the quality of Stanley, and like your grandpa's water bottle, the camping cookware will last you a lifetime and create the memories that Stanley is proud to be a part of. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley gear. That's the best deal you're going to find anywhere. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and enter the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase, when you check out, and you'll get the Powell Movement deal. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. So I know you're not part of the whole trick scene, but back then it seemed like towards 99, 2000, 2001 and on, there were so many events for those FMX guys, like between the Red Bull X Fighters, there was Dew Tour stuff, there was Monster stuff, there was just shit everywhere going on, and those guys had so many events, and then it all just disappeared, it looked like. I mean, I think there's X Games, but what happened to that whole segment of the sport where it just went poof and it's gone?
Yeah, I think, at one point it was amazing because there was guys doing so many tricks, and then it got to the point of where the backflip came into play, and then the backflip just got taken to such a level that they're doing all their tricks upside down in backflips, and then now it's kind of gotten to the point where it's a little bit over our heads, I mean, they're doing double backflips with tricks in them, they're doing front flips with tricks in them, and it's just gotten to such a level that it's hard to compete and sustain it, so I think as of right now, the only freestyle contest left is X Games. And I think it just had gotten to such a level and such a dangerous thing that, I think the simplicity is what's appealing to the crowds these days. And don't get me wrong, I'm friends with so many freestyle riders, and I think it's the most badass thing ever. And the tricks that they're doing is amazing, and they're progressing what is physically possible on a motorcycle. But yeah, it's hard to kind of sustain that and keep that going with the contest programs and how dangerous it is. And, I'd like to see more of it, but unfortunately it's just that's X Games is about the only one left. And I think it had gotten to such a level where they needed certain ramps for certain tricks at certain distances. And then everyone kind of started butting heads of they need this ramp at this distance, but the other guy needs it at this. And there was just too much back and forth. So, I think it's cool to see it still in X Games, to see the sport still progress, but hopefully you'll see some more pop up here and there. But, as of right now, I think the simplicity of, kind of the whip contests and the quarter pipe stuff and free riding in general is appealing to the masses. And it's something that the average Joe that rides on the weekend can kind of wrap their head around, rather than seeing a double backflip knack and not even knowing what you just watched.
Yeah, just having your mind blown, but knowing that you'll never, ever, ever be able to do that unless it's a video game.
Yeah.
The big thing that seems like a difference to me between the two scenes is the FMX vibe seems like a party of best friends where everybody's hanging out and having a good time. Whereas the race world kind of seems like a cold place where friends become enemies and the vibe's all about competition. Did you kind of feel that way in the race world where it's like your best friend you're not even looking at on race day because you want to beat him?
Yeah, it's funny. That's kind of what's the difference between racing and freestyle. Freestyle, everyone's kind of pumped for each other to see them land their tricks, and then you get to the racing world and you're bred to beat your competitor. So, you can be friends off the track, but as soon as everyone puts their helmet on and gets to the line and lines up, you want to beat your competitor. So that's kind of the mentality that it's always been, and that's racing in its purest form. You're bred to beat your competitor. So I think that what I do now in free riding is amazing because we are feeding off of each other and each other's energies. And, I think a lot of the guys that I ride with that are in the free ride world now, like, we feed off each other's energy and we bring the best out of each other. We see someone do something and we're like, oh, that was rad, but you don't want your buddy to outdo you. So it puts the pressure on for you to perform. So it keeps it fun. And, at the end of the day, it's just fun to compete with your friends and kind of laugh about it going into it, and then may the best man win. That's how we always leave it and kind of keep it that way. We're all fortunate to be able to do what we love and have the platforms to do what we love. So yeah, little by little we get to go out there and compete against each other, but enjoy what we're doing at the same time.
Well, before you can get out there and enjoy competing against each other, you're competing against people and it's maybe not as enjoyable because you're going for the win. And when you're in high school, you make it to nationals a few times and you're in stacked fields, like you said, and you weren't, I don't think, ever really a top guy. Is that frustrating to be probably good in your little regional races, but then when you get to nationals, just realizing that the talent is pretty far ahead of you?
Yeah, for sure. It was tough, especially growing up where I did in Central California. Not a lot of bikes. We would go to a lot of the local races, but you would either have to go to Northern California or Southern California to find the fast guys. And you show up to some of the nationals, and it's hard to compete against some of the guys that train at training facilities, and that's what they do all day, every day to get ready for these races that are one week a year. So I was a kid. I went to school, and I wasn't able to do that. I did my best and made it work. But yeah, it was really cool to be able to come from that and basically work for it,
Yeah. So it's a little bit frustrating there, but I would think injuries are even more frustrating for you in high school because I'm sure you've got a ton of energy and I think you end up blowing your knee twice while you're in high school. And is that really what makes you take a little bit of time off of racing, is just you need a break and you need to heal from the injuries and reset your mind?
Yep. Unfortunately, I've been through the ringer. I've had tons of injuries, and in high school I was injured a lot, and I got to the point where I had 3 back-to-back injuries, and I just took a back seat on racing. I still rode for fun and went to the tracks on the weekend and went up to the Salinas Ramblers property with my family, but I worked Monday through Friday and installed hardwood floors for 3 years and kind of took a backseat on racing when I was in high school. And then basically right around my senior year, right after I graduated, I started actually going to some amateur nationals again, and knowing that I had an opportunity to do it, and I might as well chase it. So I graduated when I was 17, and I had about another year to start making money and turn pro, and made a little bit of money to start heading down south and chasing my dream. So that's what I did. And the injuries are an unfortunate part of what we do, but you got to pay to play, and it's not if it happens, it's when. It's a tough sport on your body, and especially mentally when you're overcoming these injuries and trying to get back to fighting shape. It's not easy. So just going through all those ups and downs and the ebb and flow of that teaches you a lot through the process. Just all about perseverance and never giving up. So I'm thankful to be able to go through those injuries, because every time I get back, it always makes me appreciate it that much more.
And you get back to nationals in 2010, and this time, do you have a different mentality? Like, fuck it, I have nothing to lose. And is it easier that way when you have that mentality?
Yes and no. You want to get out there and prove yourself again, but at the same time, when you're on the couch and everyone else is progressing, it's hard to come back and know mentally that you can be there. But every time I've ever been injured and I come back, it makes me appreciate it so much more, and I tend to come back and I'm more hungry than ever. So it's definitely a double-edged sword. It's hard because you're on the couch while people are getting better, and you got to make up for some lost ground. So that's always the hardest part of the mental battle. But just the persevering through it is something that it's a life lesson and a life skill to be able to apply that to anything in life and just never give up.
So when you end up winning that college class at nationals, that has to be like mind blown, the happiest moment of your life. Like, I thought everything could have been in the toilet. I went and put in this extra effort and tried to make this thing happen and gave it another chance, and it did. And that, I think, qualifies you for Supercross as like a pro-am for the next year.
Yeah, so I ended up racing Loretta Lanes, and I went there with zero expectations, just first time to the biggest amateur national in the world, and ended up walking away with the win, which was amazing. It definitely jump-started my career, but I actually ended up racing one more year of amateurs that next year, and unfortunately got hurt the very beginning of the year at one of the qualifiers, and basically had no choice but to rehab another knee injury and then try and go back and chase another year of amateurs, or just bite the bullet and throw myself in with the Wolves. So that's exactly what I did. And it was quite the learning experience to just get in there and learn it as quick as I did. And it was an uphill battle when I started, but I got myself through it and put my head down and was able to check off a couple boxes of goals that I had as a kid of just, being on the line of a Supercross main event and being able to make a couple mains that first year was pretty rad.
And on the Supercross circuit, like, you're solo, you're a privateer on your own. Do you reach out to different manufacturers and try to get yourself a factory ride, or how does that all work out? Because I would think when you get qualified to be on the Supercross tour, it'd make it a lot easier for you to get hooked up by people because you're going to get some exposure.
Yeah, I reached out to a few people, but obviously with being injured after my last year of amateurs, basically missing a full year, and then trying to get some support with not any results that year. I mean, in our industry, you're only as good as your last race. So unfortunately, like when I went to Loretta's the next year and got hurt, or was trying to qualify for Loretta's and got hurt, basically my year was a wash. I reached out for some support, didn't really get too much, but I had a red group of people behind me that supported me and paid my entry fees to help me get to the races and paid for gas and hotels and stuff. And that kind of just kept me afloat and got me to experience the whole Supercross.
How many events are you able to go on that first year?
I did the whole West Coast part of the series. So the 250 class gets split into East and West Coast, and I think there's 8 rounds on each coast. So I did 8 rounds of West Coast Supercross in 2013.
When you do a Supercross, I mean, I've been to one before, and when you're in the pits, it's all these huge vehicles and everybody's got their bikes out, and it's just a really cool setup. But you being a privateer, what does your setup look like? Is it like a pickup truck with a little trailer and you're kind of just like off to the side?
At a couple races, I had my van. At the time, I was sponsored and riding for DC Shoes. So, at a couple of the races where they had their rig, I was able to pit under the DC rig, which was an amazing opportunity to kind of have a rig and a home base and an air conditioning when I go inside, and kind of have a kitchen and some stuff to kind of keep myself fueled up for the day. So, that was a huge blessing. So, having the DC rig was nice, but a couple of the races just traveling in my van with an easy up setup and my bike at the back of my van. So I did it full privateer style, and I think it made me really appreciate it.
And eventually, I think you do another ACL, and I think you pretty much call it for Supercross after that injury. Is it just kind of like you're over the rehab of those injuries over and over, and there's nothing really happening in Supercross for you?
Yeah, after I did the West Coast Supercross series, I went to Lake Elsinore, which was the first outdoor national that year, and ended up falling in practice and tearing my ACL again. I think that was my third ACL at the time. And yeah, it was just hard to kind of rehab, but just kind of put myself through that rehab program again, because, ACLs, when you do them, you have 6 to 8 months off the bike. So it's pretty hard on the mind. And, I just went back to work at physical therapy and did everything I could to get back on the bike as quickly as I could. And, each time I did that, I would get back on the bike, and the first thing I would do would go to the rolling hills of Southern California, and I would go film and ride in the hills with my friends and freeride. And I started getting the feeling that that's kind of what I was leaning towards and going towards, because it was more fun and it was less hard on my body after so many injuries. And, I was able to create content, which was, around the time when social media was starting to grow, and content lives forever. And, you're only as good as your last race. So it's hard to maintain that positive mental fortitude to be able to go back and pick up where you left off in the racing world, when everything, the technology, the bikes, the riders, the equipment, everything is getting faster and getting better. So it's tough to kind of maintain that when you have so much time off the bike. So yeah, just fortunate enough for those situations because they allowed me to take some time off and enjoy riding and free riding. And, it's kind of led me into where I'm at now.
And it sounds like, I mean, you could have been bummed with the end of that life, but from what I was able to find, it seems like there's two things that really changed the course of your future on a bike. And one is running a follow cam for Robbie Madison. You were part of a huge production with him. What was that all about?
Yeah, so as I was riding for DC Shoes, this was actually right before my first year of Supercross. A couple weeks before, I ended up getting invited to go out to Tucson, Arizona and help Robbie film on his big DC aircraft project.
Okay.
Yeah, he was out there and needed some support with a camera bike and just having the support of another rider to judge and bank things off of. So I was fortunate enough to get involved with that and stay with the DC crew. And that was my first time being on a massive set of a big video production and just kind of see how it all comes together and how you can think of an idea and put it on paper and slowly work hard enough to have a team of people around you to make that a reality. So it was really cool to kind of be on set and see that and experience it. And then obviously just get me motivated to do that on my own at some point in my career. So fast forward to now, that's exactly what I'm doing, being able to think of ideas and present them to Red Bull and be able to do my own events and projects, which is something that I always dreamed about. And they say no dream's too big, so never give up.
Yeah, and with Red Bull, that is definitely the truth. If you come up with the right concept and the right playbook on how to execute it, they're going to make that happen. And you've proved that time and time again with them. But another big thing that happens in your career is you connect with Twitch. Jeremy Twitch Stenberg, and he kind of adopts you into his crew. How does that all fall into place?
Actually, Jeremy was filming for one of his movies out at Ocotillo Wells, and it was right after I was fresh off the Loretta's race and was able to go out there with a few of my friends. And then I ended up meeting Jeremy and his whole crew. And they pretty much took me under their wing and was able to start riding with them and filming. And between him and Moto, like being on Mato's production and then meeting Twitch was pretty rad. Just being able to kind of see Jeremy like transitioning from freestyle and taking a back seat on freestyle to start free riding and creating content. And, he kind of took me under his wing. Anytime he would go out and film, he'd call me and we'd go out together and started gaining some popularity of just, through Twitch's videos and, being able to create content with him. So I was super fortunate to meet with him and now become best friends, and to go out and film and create content is pretty amazing. And he pretty much set all that up for us. I mean, that's what these guys used to do back in the day with the Krusty's videos and Steel Roots and Terra Firma. They used to go out and film on their downtime in between races. So kind of took that into the new age and started making films and obviously social media. And yeah, he kind of created a lane for kids like myself, and I kind of took it and ran with it. And it's awesome that I can have him as a mentor in my corner and kind of teach me the ins and outs and the rights and wrongs of what he's done and how he's gotten to where he's at.
And with a dude like that, who's a badass on his bike, but he's always known for talking shit, he's a scary looking dude, he had face tats long before they were common. When you first meet and ride with him and the crew, is it intimidating at all?
Definitely. I mean, it's people you looked up to your whole life and people that I've watched in videos and films my whole life. So very intimidating at first. You feel like, being a kid, you got to show up and show out. And it was intimidating at first, but I think I made the best of it and earned their respect off the bat.
How do you impress them with your first jump there? What happens?
I kind of came up short on a couple jumps, and at first they were like, man, this kid's going to probably kill himself out here. Kind of redeemed myself by the end of the day and kind of found a new jump that had never been hit before and teed up the jump and ended up making the jump and clearing it just fine, which was awesome because it was a risky business jump. So yeah, earned the respect of finding this new jump, finding it and hitting it. And from that point forward, Twitch, I was on his side, and anytime he was going on trips or going on film trips, he'd always call me and ask if I wanted to go. And I tried to jump at every opportunity that he gave me because, every opportunity leads to another opportunity and every open door leads to another open door.
And to follow the path of these open doors, you need to have people supporting you and you need to have money behind you. You had mentioned that DC is the first big sponsor that really supports your riding. And with them, you are part of an all-time team. Who's part of the DC program when you're signed on?
Man, they had a all-star list of people. I mean, Jeremy McGrath, like the guy that I single-handedly looked up to more than anyone else. Travis Pastrana, Jeffrey Hurlings, Trey Kennard, Nate Adam, Robbie Madison. I mean, there was so many legends on there. And then, you have myself, this long-haired, hippie-looking kid that doesn't look like he belongs on the team, but they gave me an opportunity, and I tried to take that opportunity and run with it and do the best I could with it. And yeah, if it wasn't for the DC guys at that time and being able to pay me and make me be able to live my life on a normal basis was amazing. So it allowed me to be able to pay my bills at home, and then they would help me out with the rig at the races, and then pay for entry fees and gas, and they were a huge help in my program.
So they're your financial backer, and then when you go to these shoots, are you almost fanboying out every time you do a DC shoot?
Yeah, I mean, you tend to think about it like, wow, it's crazy where life takes me. I'm in a room with all the people that I looked up to as a kid, but you can't tend to think about that too much. You just got to take it for what it is and enjoy those guys' process of being around them and just kind of learning and listening and just absorbing it. So it was pretty rad to be able to meet those guys and kind of see how they operate and use it as motivation.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and while ski season is coming to a close, Elan Skis is still supporting the show because they know how important the history of this sport is. What's important to me is that you do your part by checking out Elan's site, looking at their products, and demoing a pair next season. Once you do try an Elan ski, you'll end up buying that pair as the quality and performance of Elan's products is unmatched. I'm sure you've started to see more and more Elan skis at your local hill, and the reason is because they are more fun and they're going to make you a better skier. To find out more about everything Elan and their skis, head on over to elanskis.com. Next up is Hest, and camping season is here. And if you're like me, the one thing that sucks about camping is the awful sleep you get every night. Well, you can say goodbye to that, because Hest has reinvented the sleep system, and believe it or not, it's more comfortable than the Westin Heavenly bed I sleep on every night. Think 2 layers of temperature-regulating memory foam at its best, and it comes complete with a water-resistant base and integrated compression straps that make Hest the easy choice to take anywhere. Hest and I are so confident that you will love this mattress that everyone who buys one gets a 100-night money-back guarantee. You can't go wrong with it. To find out more about the best solution for sleep when you are car camping, truck camping, van lifing, truck conversion camping, well, you get it. Head on over to Hest.com. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. They've been brewing the best beer in the Pacific Northwest since 2006, and they've been banging the drum about drinking 10 Barrel outside ever since. But they don't just go outside and drink. They support athletes like skiers Kate Zelef and Lucas Walks, and snowboarder Ben Ferguson, mountain biker Carson Storch, and many, many more. And they don't just pay these people. They give them beer, and they create content around them for all of us to enjoy. If that's not enough, 10 Barrel's Clean Line Seltzer has the perfect bubble recipe and flavors, and their cocktails in a can pack a punch. I love them. To find out more about 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. Another interesting sponsorship is a brand that I had supporting my show for a while, Weed Maps. Do you smoke a lot of weed?
Yeah, at a time of all these injuries, there was a time there where, I didn't like taking the pills. I didn't like the way they make me feel. And I come from a small town, and, the opioid epidemic at one point when I was growing up was really bad. So lost some friends and had a lot of people in my hometown that kind of went down the wrong path. So I kind of made a vow to myself that if I get injured and all these injuries, that I would not take these opioids. And cannabis definitely helped for that. And, it was pretty cool to be able to be on Weed Maps for the time that I was and the opportunities that they presented me with. And it was pretty cool to kind of see that and then break that stigma of cannabis in sports. I think it's something that can help people, especially when it comes to opioids. I've gone through now shattered feet, broken femur, multiple ACLs. I've done so many surgeries and I haven't taken one pill. So to each his own. I'm not condoning it. Everyone's different, but yeah, it's something that could help a lot of people.
Did it ever feel strange when kids would run around that look up to you and they'd see that sticker on your helmet? I mean, I always felt weird when my kid would ask me who are your sponsors now? And I'd be like, Weed Maps is one of them. And he would look at me and shake his head disapprovingly. Did it ever feel weird to you? Kids looking at you and you're wearing a Weed Maps helmet?
Yeah, I mean, For sure at times, but that's a big thing of when I did it and why I did it was trying to break that stigma, and I'm not condoning it to kids at all.
Yep.
As you grow up, you tend to learn that like sometimes cannabis is a helping tool for a lot of people. So it was definitely weird at first, but I just tried to send that message that the reason why I do this is because of what I've been through, and I just don't like the opioids. So there's other alternatives to that.
So we'll talk about a helmet change, because your helmet does change eventually to a Red Bull helmet. And how does Red Bull come to the table? Do you just get a phone call out of the blue and Red Bull's interested in putting you on the program?
One of my favorite events throughout the whole year is Red Bull Day in the Dirt. And I'm sponsored by Fast House, and Fast House is the creator and operator of Red Bull Day in the Dirt, Red Bull being the main sponsor. And, the first few years, I met a few of the people that work for Red Bull, and they showed a bit of interest, and, I never really pushed for it. But fast forward, one day I got the call that I would never have believed, and yeah, as soon as I got that call, it was pretty surreal to be able to realize that I've done what I've done organically on my own, and I've gotten to this point, and now one of the biggest action sports companies in the whole entire world, if not the biggest, is knocking at my door and wanting me to be a part of the company. So where I grew up in Central California, my neighbor was a road racer for Honda, and he rode for Red Bull, and I was good friends with his son. And me and his son used to go into the house and put his Red Bull hats on all the time and be like, oh, how cool would it be to ride for Red Bull or have a Red Bull helmet? And it's just so funny, man. Like the biggest full circle moment of like remembering that as a kid and then being presented with my brand new painted Red Bull helmet for the first time was something that's you can't put into words.
How did they do it? How'd they give you your helmet?
It's actually funny because I'm my own manager. I kind of negotiate all my own stuff. So they reached out to me and they negotiated with me, and then showed up to one of the events. And, I kind of knew that it was going to happen, but showed up with the helmet in their hand. And my team manager, Steve, presented me with the helmet. And, it was just one of those craziest feelings ever. I mean, knowing that it was coming, but then just actually having the helmet in your hand and seeing it for the first time, getting to put it on was a pretty surreal moment for me.
And that has to be a really, like you say, surreal moment, but just an eye-opening moment, because once you sign on to Red Bull, you're guaranteed to be wearing their hat or their helmet at all times. And really what that does is it puts a spotlight on you at all times. Everyone knows you're a Red Bull athlete. Everywhere you ride, everybody's looking at you to blow their minds. And do you feel that as an athlete, once you put the Red Bull stuff on and you're part of that program, that everybody expects something more from you, and maybe even Red Bull expects something more from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you put that on and it's world renowned. You put a Red Bull helmet on and you must be good at your sport or whatever you do. So it's pretty surreal to be able to put that on for the first time. And of course, it adds some added pressure, but that added pressure comes with a lot of hard work, and you put in the work and you make things happen for yourself. It's exactly what I did. And, it's now pressure that I can deal with. At first, when they hired me, like, going to X Games and all these events that I have and races and whatever, that's all really cool. But the biggest thing that they want and they needed was content, and the content lives forever. So to be able to think of the off the wall ideas and the craziest ideas that I have for events and projects and be able to present it to them, and then them just having a massive team of people at Red Bull Media House and Red Bull North America and all that, just to be able to kind of put all their heads together and fine tune these projects and come to you with the budget to be able to produce these projects is pretty cool. So it was pressure at first, but it's something that I kind of fed off of, and they kind of made it easier on me by trying not to put the pressure on results or this or that. It was just, we purely want content. So it makes it easy. And that's exactly what I wanted to do from when I was a kid. Even if I wasn't racing or couldn't be champion or chase my dream until I became champion, I would wanted to figure it out and just ride a motorcycle, travel, and be able to film. And that's basically what I'm doing now. So very fortunate to be on Red Bull and have that opportunity.
Yeah, because content creation is really what you're all about these days. And it starts, I think, with Fast House, when you meet Kenny and you get put on the Fast House program. And up-and-comers who have a vision come to a program, they usually have an idea of what they want to do. And I think you come to Kenny and you're like, hey, I've got a project that I want to do, and it eventually becomes East Coast is Toast. And what's the whole concept behind East Coast is Toast?
Yeah. So we wanted to go back, me and my friend Darren Durham, we wanted to go back and race Supercross and do it an alternative way and document our whole trip and our races and everything behind the scenes as well. So Fast House jumped on board right away and was super thankful for them to put us on the road and compete. And it was amazing. We were able to do 8 videos of every round and show people what it's like life on the road. And it's really cool to go back and see that because, I get to relive that year of my second year of Supercross in 2016. I get to relive it through film. So that's what we do, and why I do what I do is the content lives forever, and to be able to go back and watch it, relive those moments is pretty cool.
And while it's a risk for Kenny putting money into that and hoping that it's going to work out, it turns out that like 60,000 people watch each episode, and it turns out to really help grow the Fast House brand, and it's really a big deal for them. And is that what lets you know right there, once you finish that project and see the results, that like, holy shit, not only was the idea a cool one, it worked, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my career, is just create small projects like this because I've proven I can do it?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. We kind of produced and provided for them, and the views were there, and people loved it. So I think it brought a lot of eyes back to just filming content in a whole, and as well as bringing eyes back to Fast House and ultimately just selling product and selling gear, which is the main goal of the whole thing. And that's exactly what we did. And I think it helped Fast House tremendously. And now be in this position if it wasn't for Kenny. And I think he can confidently say vice versa. Fast House wouldn't be in that position if it wasn't for East Coast's Toast and Darren and I doing what we did and bringing all the eyes back to such a cool company that's all driven off of riding motorcycles and having fun.
Awesome, man. And Fast House has done more than just supporting that trip. They helped you get your SAG card too. What made you wanted to get into stunt work? I mean, it seems like every action sports athlete has a little thought of that, like, hey, I'm wrecking my body all the time anyway. I can do these things. Was that your idea? It was like, hey, I know how to fall. I can take these situations without fear, and I want to be on the big screen?
Yeah, so the owners of Fast House, that's what they did. They were stuntmen, and that's how Fast House started, was a bunch of stuntmen getting together, and they would go to Los Angeles County Raceway, and they would go with their families, and that's eventually what turned into A Day in the Dirt. A Day in the Dirt is all mostly stuntmen, and then now it's turned into one of the funnest races ever where, you get stuntmen, you get pros, you get average Joes, you get anyone and everyone in between. You get the vintage bikes, you get the 2-strokes, you get everything, you get the kids. So that's how all that started. And me getting closer and closer with Kenny, I know that what I do is not going to last forever. So, trying to have a backup plan was key. And I'm just obviously super, super inspired by film. So I think it's an amazing opportunity for me to be on set, obviously doing the stunts and doing what I do, but being able to just be on set and see how it all comes together and just ultimately take that and tie it back into my own filming and producing and creating of content,
Yeah. And with Moto, you've had your fair share of crashes, but you're not really prepared for them. They just kind of happen. But when you're doing stunt work, you're going to be put in harm's way. Does that make it more scary or easier?
It's definitely scarier, when you're riding, you're obviously trying not to fall. You're not expecting to fall, and when it happens, and it's kind of a surprise. But putting yourself in the mindset to know that you're going to have to go and crash and what's about to happen is a little bit harder. But we've done this for years, and unfortunately, we've had plenty of crashes. So the crashes, it comes with the territory, but being able to know how to crash and crash on purpose and get out of it like safely is key. So, and I think it definitely helps, my own sport of when I go back, and if I do, something does happen and you see it coming, you can kind of know how to crash and get out of it safely. So, when we're doing the stunt work, we're wearing a lot more safety equipment than we do when we're riding, because when we're riding and riding tracks and free riding, you want to be loose and nimble. So, we don't wear as much safety equipment, but it's nice to know each side of the aspects of crashing.
With stunt work, I think you've done a few different projects. Is the pay really awesome compared to riding your dirt bike?
It's amazing. I mean, being in the union and being able to work on set, like, the pay is really well, and it's just an awesome opportunity. So it's a give or take thing. Creating content is cool. There's money to be made there. But, when it comes to my events like X Games and stuff, those are kind of like a bread and butter. You make a good chunk of change for one day's work. So it's kind of cool to see both sides of it. But being on set, the money's good and it's nice. And if you're in a union, it's all taxed and everything. So what you make is what you get.
Yeah, I guess when you're an independent contractor, you get all these checks, and then at the end of the year, when tax season comes, if you haven't saved money for taxes, it kind of feels like you're writing the government a $40,000 check, and that's got to suck for you.
Yeah, yeah, paying Uncle Sam's not fun, but that's the world we live in, and we got to do what we got to do. So being an athlete's not easy to in that situation, but that's just the way it is.
But I would think one thing that your SAG card gets you, because I would think being an athlete, your insurance premiums would be through the roof. But with SAG, do you get a really great insurance rate?
My premiums are pretty much through the roof and my own stuff. And, obviously being injured and being injured on a motorcycle multiple times, it makes it expensive. But, through the union, you can earn insurance, but, you have to be working a lot and you have to make enough credits through each quarter to be able to keep your insurance. So I was able to get on SAG insurance for a little bit, which was amazing. But unfortunately, I had a couple injuries and I wasn't able to do stunts for a couple of years. So I'm now back to my individual insurance, but it's okay. Hopefully I can keep plugging away and earning some more jobs through SAG and hopefully re-earn that insurance through the union.
I mean, do you pay like $3,000 a month in insurance? I would think your premiums are crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive. It's probably about $1,000 a month.
Ah, man. Well, let's see where I'm going to go before we finish this thing off. I guess one thing we really didn't talk about, but you mentioned it as your bread and butter, is the X Games, and we're not going to talk about it that much. You have a gold, 3 silvers, 7 bronze medals. What's your standout moment at X Games?
I mean, the standout moment at X Games for me was overcoming my injury, crawling myself out of an 11-month hole after shattering my feet and coming back and just being there and competing under the lights again was my ultimate goal. But the highlight moment for me was coming away with a obviously silver medal. That first night was amazing, but winning that gold medal the second night was something that you can't even put into words. And, that's definitely my highlight moment and my only goal to this point. So I'm currently about to get back into the swing of things and start training for X Games, Summer X Games coming up in July. So I have another opportunity for 2 more events and 2 more medals. So that's my goal, is to get me a couple more medals, and hopefully both of them are gold.
Awesome, man. Well, I could talk about that horrible injury to your foot that you were talking about, but you know what? I'm going to save you from that painful memory because it is an awful injury that people can probably find online. We don't need to talk about it. But at this point, I have something that I call inappropriate questions.
Okay.
And what I do is I get someone that you know to ask 3 questions. They can be anything. I record them asking them and I play them back to you. I was able to get action sports agent extraordinaire Ryan Runke to ask you 3 questions, and he could ask anything. Are you ready for question number 1 from Runke?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, let me cue it up for you right here.
What up, TV? It's Runke. Can you explain to the viewers what 80 watts means?
All right, so 80 watts. When I was recovering from my foot and I was at the Red Bull gym, I was doing physical therapy every single day. And there's times when we get a little excited and we have some adult beverages and we have a little too much fun. So I was constantly having to be on the spin bike, regaining my strength back in my legs. And 80 watts was a nice, solid, good area for me to stay in. And I basically just took that and I applied it to everything in life. If I stay at 80 watts, then I'll stay right in the zone that I need to be in. So just staying at 80 watts, that's a role to live by. Just not too much, not too less.
All right, perfect. We will go with question number 2 from Runke.
Question number 2. I'd like to have you recap the story of the first night me and you became friends and met in Minnesota before maybe 2018 X Games. I'm not sure what year it was, and you had practice at 7 a.m. Maybe you want to tell that story.
So the night that I met Runke was at X Games 2018, I think, either 17 or 18. It was my first X Games, and I went there and I was focused on whip, was my bread and butter, my main competition, and it was my first time competing in quarter pipe. Never hit a quarter pipe before, and basically had practice the next day, and that was my first time having to hit it. And I was obviously really excited after getting my first medal and competing in whip the first night. I was really excited and ended up having a little bit of fun that night and having some adult beverages. And the next morning, I was feeling a little under the weather the next morning, but had to show up and basically compete and, go hit the quarter pipe for the first time. But I think going into that situation, and I guess having a few adult beverages the night before kind of made me think about it less, and showed up in the morning and turned my brain off. I didn't think. I just went and kind of roasted the quarter pipe my first time and kind of got those nerves off my plate, and pretty much started going higher than everyone right off the bat after never hitting it. But I think that played a key of the night before, of having fun and not putting too much pressure on the next day.
The nerves were still dull from the night before.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go with Runkey's final question. Here we go.
TB, Runkey, give me a start to finish on the night you won the Monster Cup. Flew to LA for the Joy premiere, flew back to Vegas in the morning, and then directly to Rampage. Recap that 36 hours for the viewers. I'm sure they all want to hear the story. It's a true story.
Yeah, so Monster Cup 2019, I actually finished my competition that day. As soon as my competition was over, I flew home from Vegas, left my van in Vegas, flew home to LA, went to a snowboard premiere called Joy. It was actually a film that Runkey worked on with his creative company, Homestead Creative.
Yep.
It was actually movie of the year that year, snowboard movie of the year. So was able to go back, and I'm really inspired by snowboarding and friends with a lot of snowboarders. So I was able to go back and watch these guys film, and, we had fun after that. These guys, they spent their whole winter filming this thing, and it was kind of time to let loose. So we had a fun night, and the next morning hung by the pool for a few hours, and then ended up getting on a plane, flying back to Vegas, getting in my van, which I had my bikes in still. It was Sunday after Monster Cup. All my friends were gone from Vegas, had driven home already. So I got back to Vegas, was by myself, and kind of explored the town by myself, and ended up in some adult entertainment places, and had a really fun night. Ended up leaving my hotel the next day and driving to Rampage to watch the mountain bike event and watch all the mountain bike boys compete. And I was a bit tired from my travels and competing and my nightlife, so I ended up pulling over on the side of the road, got some Chipotle, slept for a few hours, woke back up, and got back on the road and went straight to Rampage and climbed 2,600 flights of stairs over 2 days. A vertical climb, just climbing up and down that hill and watching all the boys compete. So had an amazing time, and it's just one of those memories that you chalk up as a good one.
And I think I got some sound bites from you for the podcast at Rampage. And I think when I interviewed you there, you had glitter all over you. And I didn't know what that glitter was from, but I'm guessing it was from the adult entertainment the night before.
It was. It was a fun time in my life. So yeah, I had a bit of fun and still had some glitter stuck to me.
Oh, it's amazing. Well, that's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And looking at your life and times, it's like your career was made by the pivot. Like, sure, you wanted to do Supercross, but really that wasn't your path. And while you could have just quit and gone on with life, you pivoted in a different direction, and you found your professional athlete career could be complete with nothing more than creating content. And while that's not the only thing you do, it's like that and your style are what people are going to remember you for. And that's how it should be, man. And I want to thank you for your time.
Hey, yeah, thank you for the time. And yeah, if I can leave anyone with one message, it's no dreams too big, and just to never give up on your dreams. There's been so many times where I've been beaten down and bruised and battered, and probably should have tried to figure something else out. But, this was my goal as a kid when I was 4 years old, that I wanted to be a professional motorcycle rider. And I told myself I'd do whatever it takes to get to that point. I did. I had some bad luck, and I had to kind of reevaluate it. And, it's honestly led me to so many amazing experiences and opportunities. And, there's just something to be said about never giving up and where opportunities may lead. So if your kids out there listening to this, never give up. Keep chasing your dream and doing what you love. And most importantly, enjoy what you're doing when you're doing it.
So that was time with Tyler Bereman. And for a dude that kills it in such a high-risk sport, he was so much more chill than I anticipated. And the coolest thing about Tyler, that really didn't come out here, is that he's a creative visionary. He's the rider putting together projects for all the riders to enjoy. So he's not just an athlete, he's not just a content creator. He's an organizer of events and community, and that is so important to helping these sports thrive. That's the podcast. At this point, I want to ask you to review me wherever you listen. Email me with any guest suggestions or questions or concerns. My email is mike@thepowellmovement.com. And finally, please support the brands that make the show happen. They are Stanley, Hest, Elon Skis, Rollerblade, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.